Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. Previously on the podcast, I discussed trademarking. And so if you're curious what my thoughts are on whether or not you need to trademark the name of your literary magazine, journal, or press, listen back to that episode and it may help you. Again, this podcast, the Lit Mag Lab, is for both, publishers and writers. And anyone interested in maybe starting a literary magazine, existing editors, fellow editors, and writers, artists even, this hopefully helps, me just sharing and talking about, different questions others typically have, even questions I had starting out, covering those, because I remember when I was, starting Dippity up and other things like that, it took me a lot of research and time to really, figure things out. And, we make mistakes along the way. And I think it's important to share our experiences with others in the community. And it may help someone, I think that's cool, just sharing. And, Anyways, so for this episode, we're going to cover like a general thing here. So I think a lot of us as writers, we always want to make progress to improve or strengthen our writing, especially when we're, I feel like, younger, or even, any age. You may want to, try to improve your writing, or maybe you've had a hard time getting published and you feel like, it could be from feedback you had from others, it could be from a Lit Mag journal, or, online even you got feedback, and maybe it was, you felt that your work wasn't strong enough based on the feedback. You want to improve like your structures of your lines, your development. It could be of a story. Story development is not easy to do. Making a very bite-sized, clear story that packs a punch. Same thing with poetry. And so I think I'll share from my personal experience. I think a lot of us, in our classes over the years, in middle school, high school, college, university, we are given a lot of writing assignments, right? And I feel like completing those can definitely help you, doing your homework. You can learn a lot by that, And I personally, the first major I ever enrolled in was for a technical community college. It was for mobile app development and programming. I ended up switching to technical management somewhere down the road. And then, I finished that as a 2-year degree. Then I completed a 4-year degree, through Bowling Green State University, which was learning design and technology, which is basically instructional design and technology, adult learning theory principles and stuff like that. I haven't, per se had a job that was solely focused on instructional design and stuff like that thus far, or anything tied to that. I had some near, interviews and stuff like that for like LMS administration, learning management systems, but never landed anything, So I did do a lot of writing, instructional writing, and how-to guides in, tech support, tech support departments for organizations and companies. So I think, sometimes, in school and college and classes, that can help you, if you do your homework and complete it, your teacher, whoever the professor is, gives you feedback on your work, right? Some professors, teachers, they go the extra mile. I remember I had some teachers in middle school. They would, sit down with each student and, in the class, and they would take a couple minutes for each student and go through their, it could be an essay or a story, and mark it up in a red ink, and go over it with us, and give suggestions. I really like that. And not all teachers do that. Some teachers, totally just give out, maybe a grade and a very brief comment, very little, not much. But absolutely, I had some teachers in the past that gave some really lovely feedback and took the time to sit down with me and, made sure I understood, some things that a lot of us struggle with, I think, are, we all have typos now and then, sentence structuring. Sometimes we have to move things around, in our work to improve clarity and stuff like that. And so something you could do, if you're a writer starting out at any age, if you aren't huge on, submitting to lit mags and journals, I mean, it's not for everyone, obviously. But I think, something I'll share before I get to my next point that I'll circle back to, the more you submit to lit mags and journals, you can strengthen your writing. The more you do that, it helps. I think it does, some places do give feedback, without an additional fee or anything like that. And some have feedback options, and that can really help you, I've seen, poets take that feedback and really leverage it to iron out their work. And anyways, so something you could do, again, at any age is to, if you're not so keen on submitting to lit mags and journals or not interested in doing that, there are workshops, there are classes, there are virtual events you can, sit in on or enroll in, lessons and things like that. And most of them aren't free, but it may help you to sit in on one. Now, where do you find these events and classes and things like that to partake in? Well, I have never really done a extensive workshop class or writing, to my knowledge, not that I recall. I have done some things through, school field trips and stuff. We had gone to, I forgot this building. It may have been the Loft Literary Center. I may have been there once, back in my home state, Minnesota. But, there was a place where, again, I mentioned we did hand-bound books and made paper from scratch, and there were some other things where we had, writing activities and different things in our classes. But today, a lot of writers are aware of Chill Subs, and most recently, I'm going out to their site right now, guys. I'm not sharing my screen with you, but if you go to chillsubs.com on their site and check out events, they have a new events section. It's fairly new. And if you scroll down, they have, various, events and it looks like workshops almost that you can attend. Now, I've heard about the Forever workshop. I think they have a Substack, and I've occasionally, pointed, links to some really great articles from there. And, on my Substack too. So, check out the event section of Chill Subs. Another great example of, different classes. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to scroll through. So there's one called, You Had Me at the First Sentence in, looks like July 12th. There are even ones for, trying to, get fellowships, residencies, grants, how to land a job in indie lit, things like that. Best practices for submitting to humor sites, and how to engage with editors. There's so many. I think that's really cool, and they appear to be all Zoom based, and it looks like it ranges from $50 to, I think that's it. I don't see any other. There might be higher priced ones, I'm not sure, but you can see, I think, the number of people. There's a number, when you hover over next to the fee amount. So looks like it's showing 177, 86, 20, 48 people, I think 19 people. So it looks like others, a lot do attend events and stuff. I haven't sat in on one to date, but a lot of very cool, very awesome lessons, tutorials that fellow writers, editors in the community run, and help, writers and others. I think attending those can help you grow as a writer or learn more about the space of, literary magazines, publications, and, submitting. And it might help you, who knows, get discover an opportunity. And you can, I think through workshops, not just virtual ones, but, they have some in existence in the world outside of Chill Subs, that are probably in person. You could probably look around locally, what's available to you. I'm originally from, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I mentioned the Loft Literary Center. Now, I've never, taken a class or anything at the Loft, but I had a friend, not a couple years back, but I had a friend that I knew from high school days. They had told me they took a Loft Literary Center class, and they really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. I think they, had a lot of growth through it, and So if you go to the Loft, you may not be based in Minnesota, but this is just an example. You can look out locally too. There may be a an organization where you live that focuses on writing, and if not, there's these are also not necessarily on site in classroom. They have at the Loft online Zoom ones too. So so it's loft.org, loft.org. So I'm out on their website and I'm under classes, and I'm going to select the online Zoom classroom. Obviously, I don't know if Zoom's going to be around forever, but there are multiple different virtual meeting applications, Google Meet, stuff like that. So just note that in the future things can change, platforms and things, and Anyways, so on here on the Loft, their classes are a little bit pricier, I'd say. Not necessarily. I mean, there's this single session that looks like it's $66, $74, rate. They have some long workshops, or events in classes, online 6-week ones, one like writing with the senses, for example. That one's looks like it's up to $222. They have a lot of 8-week, 6-week courses and single sessions all online. So some are creative, nonfiction ones, novel writing, screenplay, essays, creative nonfiction. Some of them are just held, every Wednesday, or some are more intensive, like 8 weeks or so. And they even have some poetry ones, single sessions, about, $74. So that's not too bad, honestly. There are some very short, it looks like single session ones. It looks like it's called a sampler event. That is just an hour, and it's like $8. So as you go through the pages, it looks like they have 3 pages thus far on, the window I'm on. And so it $55, $49 for single sessions, and they have double session events, that are also, some get pricier, they have apprenticeship stuff and classes, and some other ones, 8-week ones that are, $400, $300 or so. And so they have year-long, writing project cohorts and stuff that are, $7,000 and stuff. And it looks like they have an upcoming one on August 2nd, which is about $74, Revelation and Joy, a class for queer and trans writers. So you'll come across, a lot of really amazing classes online if you search very closely. Chill Subs events, the Loft has a lot of online virtual classes as well. I've never attended one, but I have heard from, a close friend of mine that they really like that. I think they went to an on-site. I could be wrong, but it was a long time ago, but they really enjoyed it. And the Loft has been around for quite some time. They do other things too, so check out their site. Recommend it for sure. And another place, I think Poets and Writers, right? They have some events and stuff now and then. Let's go to Poets and Writers site, pw.org. So they do have a register for classes section, and if you scroll down on the page, they have some upcoming ones too. Looks like there were some this June as well. And writing a queer classic, mapping the maze for poets. They have rules for fiction, So theirs are like, it looks like 225, 180, 120 range. Not seeing anything. They might have some classes that are lower than that. I haven't seen anything thus far listed. But I think they do have some fee waiver options too, per their site. So you can look into that. Some workshops and events totally do have, fee waiver options. Not all, but always look for that, because it's possible to get a discounted rate, or, it says here on Poets and Writers, if you're eligible or granted a fee waiver, you're responsible for a nominal $25 fee. So there are things like that. So, it's not too bad, fee-wise. There are a lot of, free ones out there too. You have to do some digging or hunting, or very low-rated ones. But if fees are absolutely an issue for you in terms of attending classes, know that you can totally reach out to, whoever's in charge, the site, typically has instructions for contacting and seeing about a fee waiver to get it reduced, because I think, fees oftentimes prevent others from, attending those classes or lessons or workshops. Things are tight for a lot of people, and every dollar counts. So yeah. What else? Poetry Foundation, I think they have some classes too. Let's check it out. poetryfoundation.org. And yeah, again, not all of these are solely poetry classes. As I mentioned, they have some for, as I was scrolling through the sites, and I'll link these all below, for essay writing, novel writing, short story writing, all kinds of, a lot of different classes covering, various different styles of writing and forms and things like that even. So yeah, I'm on poetryfoundation.org. I'm going under events and programs. They have some virtual events, online poetry reads and stuff, and even sitting on, some poetry reading events, and is a good way to help you, listening to other poets, and you can get inspired by them. Now, when I say you're, getting inspired by writers and things like that, some poets, some writers, they do inspo pieces, right? A lot of us are aware of that. And you have to be very careful about, a lot of people say don't cross that line. And that line is, do not plagiarize, right? It's okay to be inspired by, a poet you look up to or a writer in the world. But it's absolutely, horrendous to see anyone plagiarize. It's very heartbreaking and hurtful. It impacts, I mentioned this again, the literary magazine and journal world, every single year, signs of detections of plagiarism are found every year. Again, this has come up in the community again quite recently. And so it's always very upsetting and sad to hear about, plagiarism events, a poet getting acceptances into a bunch of lit magazine journals, but a majority of the work being plagiarized. And then, that makes more work for the lit magazine journals. Oftentimes they have to, pull things down, make notes and things like that, and it affects them. And it's a ripple effect, totally. And so totally okay to be inspired by poets, but do not cross that line of plagiarism. And I have it in my article here. I'm going to go out to the Lit Mag Lab. So something I typed out recently was, again, in that outline, here it is. So I made a section, subtips, I may rename these, but, under top reasons why poets and writers get declines and rejections, it is, one of the reasons is lack of originality. So, you may write a poem and it's possible you weren't inspired by anyone. You just wrote a poem, right? But if it doesn't have a very high originality score at all, and it, what, again, I mentioned what some lit magazine journals do, right? They scan your poem, and for, the creativity, right? And things like that. But aside from that, to minimize, the likelihood to check if it's plagiarized or not, right? Listen back to that episode. I think, was it 15? I think it was 15 or so. The plagiarism episode we did. Let's see. I think it was 15. No, it wasn't 15. It was 17. Yeah, 17. Episode 17, how to address and catch plagiarism. So, plagiarism checkers aren't 100% accurate, but, a lot of lit magazine journals do, check for plagiarism through a scanner or some tool. I know some lit magazine journals, editors, or founders even go as far as paying a monthly fee for some of the additional features of plagiarism checkers and stuff, for deep dive scans and stuff, because it is such a, I think it's increased more than ever, a lot of plagiarism, a lot of theft of writing work, unfortunately. So, yeah, you want to make sure, your work is absolutely original. And again, if you've never written an after poem, and, I think everyone should at least try, different styles of poetry at least once, for fun too, even. So, I started writing on Instagram, in the Instagram poetry community. I came back in 2021. And what I did, and this also helped me, I'll share, I, entered a lot of prompt challenges, and I was in an Instagram group, like a writing group, a couple writing groups actually, and they would have these challenges for us. We'd all write around this topic, tag each other, support each other, and get feedback from others. And I thought that was really nice. And and then there was also a group on, there are different community accounts back around the time of the pandemic and stuff, too, on Instagram. And we would, do some challenges, some cool stuff, and collab with poets. Like, we would write the beginning of a poem, and then someone, we didn't know would finish the poem, and, things like that. So I've done some collab poems, and those are a lot of fun too with others in the community. I've done one in Spanish even. I wanted to challenge myself, even though, who I collabed with, was fluent in Spanish. I said, no, I want to do the Spanish version. I want to try and see if I can do it. And, so, again, I took Spanish in middle school and high school briefly, but I'm not super fluent in any other language, at all. But I like learning, other words in other languages. And that's another way you can, challenge yourself in the writing world. Try writing poems, you can learn new words in other languages, right? And do a poem around that, totally. Now, I've totally done after poems on social media in the past, of friends' work. Then I tag them. It's always important to credit, either, their preferred name in the heading after this poet, or to put it somewhere very visible that this poem was inspired by this poet's work. And providing visible credit is so important. Some lit magazine journals do publish after poems, and things like that. But the important thing is, I see a lot of poets, they do a really good job of crediting, this poem was inspired by this song. This poem was inspired by this artist or this writer and this poem. And so again, never plagiarize a poem or mirror word for word any lines. Be careful about doing after poems again. Blackout poems, even quote-based ones, or borrowed lines, cento poems. You should always credit pieces that inspired your work, after the first name, last name, the poem name, artist, song name. Again, I'm going to reiterate this because it's so important. Plagiarism can really ruin a writer's, a plagiarist, once that's attached to your name and stuff, that's so damaging, and it can really hurt, so don't become a plagiarist. Don't, write an original poem, write from your heart. Write from a memory that really impacted you. It's okay to be inspired by, poets' work and stuff. We've totally featured through Dippity Lit Mag some cento poems and some very cool after poems and stuff. So, just originality is so important, You have to be upfront about any quotations and stuff, epigraphs, totally okay to kickstart your poem with a small epigraph or a quote that, inspired you and stuff. But again, you can still have a unique title, after, the poem or inspired work and stuff, but always credit, poets' names in full, the titles, even spoken word pieces, books, artworks, anything that inspired your work, credit it, because it's so important to give that credit. Think about how you feel if someone, stole something that was original from you, and you had worked, night and day, put blood, sweat, and tears into it, and someone's out just copying and doing theft off of it, and they're not crediting you at all. Then there's not even originality in it all. They're just doing a copy paste on your work. You would feel so, it's gut wrenching feeling when someone touches your work in that manner and steals it. And then that hurts the writer, because they don't feel some writers, they feel very uncomfortable about sharing their work out there because of things happening like that. Plagiarism and theft, it's rampant in the world, So I've even had, some cases where I've had a couple, when I was starting on Instagram and poetry community on there, I've seen this even with some friends in the community, others' work getting lifted and chopped up, and others trying to pass it as their own, changing a few things here and there, and it's not their work. Some things are very distinct. Some writing styles are very, very distinct, some titles and things like that. So you totally can tell when someone is plagiarizing off you. Again, it's so important that, you credit any inspo pieces. It doesn't matter if it's not a written piece or not. If you're doing an inspired spoken word piece after someone, definitely, give credit to the inspiration, where you got the idea to do that spin-off from. It can feel really off-putting when others do inspo pieces without crediting you and trying to say this was their original idea, for this and everything. So you can land in a lot of hot water, if your work is not original and you're just like trying to, again, it's totally okay to, do an after poem off of like Emily Dickinson or even poets that are living, and things like that. But credit, I'm going to say it like 10,000 times, credit, provide credit, And if you're not sure what an after poem looks like, or, an epigraph or things like that, totally, again, take some courses, take some classes in the writing world, and various workshop events. Do some reading online. You're sure to come across some examples that you can, use to reference and to, start from scratch. Always start from scratch, whatever you're going to do. That's what I'd say, It defeats the whole purpose, I don't really see the point of plagiarizing. It's just, it hurts everyone, So yeah, you can totally, take some classes. If you're not sure where to start with poetry or how to even write a poem to begin with, and you want to enter, the publication space or get published by Lit Mag or Journal, take some courses, attend some workshops. There are, probably some poets you've read or some writers that actually hold workshops and events and classes. I know a couple poets in the community who do some events. Some have free seats, some have some paid seats, very small fees, not too bad, not thousands of dollars, and it may be absolutely worth it to invest in some classes, some workshop events, and have others, workshop your poem with you. Even, again, you could reach out locally. There are some great local events if you do some digging, and to share your work, get feedback from others. There are a lot of like spoken word open mic events even, and you might be able to connect with other poets and stuff and share your work and get feedback. If no one in your family or none of your friends like poetry, then you totally may want to, do networking events, workshops, classes. It doesn't necessarily have to be on site in person. If your schedule's really busy, you may just want to hop into one of the virtual ones again. So check out Chill Subs events. Again, Poets and Writers, pw.org. Poetry Foundation has classes too and readings. The Loft Literary Center, the loft.org, loft.org. They have a lot of classes and events and virtual ones, a very varied range of fees for those, 8 week, 6 week. Single sessions might be the best, low cost effective ones. And and some of the other individual ones and that are, maybe an hour or so, very brief. They have some $8 ones and stuff like that. So it's very cool. I was thinking about starting, some sort of, workshops or events others would sit in and on. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. Let me know, totally. But for now, I'm just doing this podcast. I'm sharing some tips now and then and my thoughts and experiences from running Dippity Lit Mag and Dippity Press. So I hope this helped you. And again, I didn't, major in writing or anything like that. I didn't major in art at all. I'm, self-taught in terms of art, everything in art-wise. I have come, to grow in, the tech space. I think I come from a technical support background, help desk environment, and, almost like, those people you walk up to and hand your laptop to and they try to figure out what's wrong with it. That's me, basically. So I used to do that quite a bit before I had some, physical challenges and stuff. I did a lot more heavy lifting, old computers, pizza box sized ones, and carts of computers, and going under desks, hooking up wires and server rooms and all of that stuff. But I think, writing is an important part of a lot of fields and things like that. And yeah. So to improve yourself as a writer, obviously there's some books out there. There are other podcasts, right, that you can listen to about ways to improve your writing, totally. But I think to really, improve your work, you have to keep writing. You have to keep challenging yourself. Something I will tack on here. So I really love, the writing prompt challenges. A lot of fellow poets in the community, not just on Instagram, but on Substacks, on social media, even online, you may come across, 30-day writing prompt challenges. Try to do one of those and see if you enjoy it. They have 60-day ones or much longer ones. I saw on Etsy somewhere even, selling 30-day challenges and stuff for writing and poetry and stuff. But there are a lot of free ones out there on social media, and it doesn't matter if it's current or not, for the month. I mean, you can use, obviously it's important. I think it's cool when you tag someone and say, I was inspired by this writing prompt. It could be old or new or current for the year. But yeah, you'll find some throughout every year. A lot of writers love to do those, and they do it their own writing prompt, and then fellow writers who follow them do the writing prompt, and it's a cool way to support each other, read each other's work, and share. I think that's cool. I made one, like a summer dippy one out there somewhere, so no one's done it yet. Maybe one day, but it's a very mini 30-day challenge, a prompt. You get inspired by a word, a line, or something. Again, always quote any lines and things like that. But yeah, a lot of word or subject matter writing prompt challenges, and you can do so much with poetry. You can write a poem or a short story around anything. And yeah, I think it's a good idea to, do workshopping events, to attend some classes and courses. I've never really done any like a boot camp writing course or anything like that, besides, school, college classes and stuff. The only thing I ever did, close to that, but it's more so like science-y realm, was the Girls in Engineering, Mathematics, and Science program, GEMS. So I spent two summer camps, over at Augsburg College, and I learned a lot from there, and it was a lot of fun. We did everything from like Lego League robotics and, various other projects. Like we had this like life-size, sorry I'm oversharing here, but yeah. So we had this life-size Mars landscape we had to shave out of styrofoam, and it was like filled an entire, like the floor and stuff. It was huge. It was like life-size to scale. Obviously not a whole planet, obviously, but you know what I mean. It was like it filled the whole floor level. It was pretty cool. And yeah, and then we did like a door alarm circuitry with like a, I think it was like we were soldering, and then, those solder irons and stuff. So yeah, with the door circuit alarm. And we did some other cool activities and stuff. And yeah, and we all sat together and ate lunch at Augsburg College, and I had a lot of fond memories on the campus and stuff in those summer camp programs. I really enjoyed them. They were pretty cool and fun. So yeah, you may have friends from those events, that you attend. I'm not saying from just like workshops and classes in general, you can connect with poets. I think it's important to, share your work with others, but, of course, those you trust, like close friends or those you establish a relationship over time with, like friendship-wise, and you can exchange your work and feel comfortable doing that. A lot of, poets and, I see they have, they attend events and stuff and with their friends and things like that, and they really can, share their work, iron it out. And getting that feedback is so beneficial. Yeah. So I started a lot getting feedback, through online writing communities, posting it, just sharing it out there. Of course, you're going to get negative feedback sometimes. You're not always going to get constructive criticism by doing that. And again, if you submit your work to Lit Magazine journals and it all comes back rejected, that doesn't mean you're a weak writer. Again, some Lit Magazine journals look for certain things and some are themed. So, be mindful about that. But some writers have never gotten published in Lit Mags or journals, and they ended up, really, finding a way to share their work outside of that, Self-publication, I mentioned, that's an option, or you can, absolutely keep trying. That's the most important thing. In order to grow as a writer, you got to keep trying. If you quit early, you're not going to grow, right? If you give up, you're going to be stagnant. I think it helps to challenge yourself, try different styles and forms of poetry. If you've never written a haiku before, if you've never written a specific style of Japanese poetry or some older forms of styles of poetry, try to challenge yourself and do that. Challenge yourself to do your first after poem. Again, don't cross that line into plagiarism. Be very mindful about that. And it's so important to create original work. But yeah, you can have a lot of fun, to different activities. I think challenges for yourself as a writer, even as artists, can really help. Ekphrastic poetry is really fun, seeing artwork and then doing a poetry piece inspired by that. Some poets in the community have totally, done collabs on their accounts of artists. I'm getting the permission, of course, to share a poem inspired by an art piece and stuff like that. Some literary magazines and journals have ekphrastic challenges. I think Rattle had one. There was another online journal that used to has those, or several out there do those challenges too. But so many events, classes, and programs out there. Again, there are some that are, low cost. There's some that are more expensive, right? The longer ones typically are. But, try to attend some lectures, some performances, workshops, and discussion events, I think it's cool to attend some discussion events and even to talk about and dissect existing work out there. There are some really cool, book club, poetry book club events and stuff, local clubs and things like that you may come across. So do some research. I'll link below the ones I mentioned. Again, I think it's cool that these places are offering events, classes, and workshops. And who knows, I may pop into one day and see, what it's like myself. But, I've heard, positive things from a few that I know on some of these that I mentioned. But I haven't attended one myself per se. So, yeah. And if you're an editor looking for ways to grow as an editor or to grow your publication or to, address something you're running into, again, you may want to check out, as I mentioned, the CLMP membership episode. You may want to consider joining the CLMP membership. And they have some great events, for editors and founders of lit magazine journals and some cool online virtual meetups and stuff. So, yeah, so many options out there thanks to technology. Several hundred years ago, no Zoom calls, no virtual meetings, no Google Meet, none of that. So I think it's cool how you can connect with others all over the world on a virtual call and just sit in and learn and grow, from anywhere. You just need, you could do it from your phone, computer, and it's very cool. So yeah, try investing in a class or workshop or event if you're really, interested in growing as a writer. I think reading books, and listening to podcasts, that's, for some that helps, but I think you really have to, get dirty, as they say, get dirty and do challenges, dig deep and really challenge yourself to, try new writing. If you've never written a short story or flash fiction or sci-fi piece, try doing it. If you've never written a sci-fi poem, try that, try new things with your writing. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're never going to see, as most say, I don't remember who said this, but you're going to see the same results over and over again. And so you want to make sure that you try new things. It's scary maybe to attend an event or an online workshop for the first time or a class or things like that. But, think about it this way. Some in your virtual class or workshop, whatever you're taking, some may be in the same boat as you taking that class for the first time. And, so just, it takes time to ease into that, at any age if you start doing that. And, again, you could always, enroll in college courses, university classes, more intensive if you really want to get a degree in, tied to creative writing or master's related, you could do that eventually one day, whenever you'd like, you may want to pursue that, maybe to further your career or, a job, to gain experience. Again, lots of opportunities out there. I mentioned in some past podcast episodes of ways to gain more experience, in the lit mag space or publication space, doing some volunteering roles. There's some internships, there's some, some paid opportunities out there, a little bit more competitive to get those because they have hundreds upon hundreds of applications. I remember I tried applying to a reader role myself. I think it was it with the Poetry Found? It was with one of the ones I mentioned on this podcast episode. But yeah, they had hundreds of applications, I think, and so it was a paid role though, and so there are paid reader roles, there are some paid ones out there too. But yeah, you can learn a lot by being a poetry reader, and or on any role on a lit mag or journal team. You can gain experience from that. And, if you join a team or something, you can reach out to your team members and say, hey, guys, what do you think about this poem I'm working on? I'm really, not sure if this makes sense, and your team members, the staff on the Lit Mag Journal can, maybe work with you and help you out too. And, some of them become lifelong friends and stuff like that, or very, close. And so, yeah, I think it's important to discuss and to share. And, with those you trust, obviously. And, just have fun, and try and see what happens. So I hope this helped you. Yeah, take care. And I'd also like to add that I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. I tried, again, totally writing a poem in Spanish, did a collab with Poet in the Community, and I returned around, 2021 and, started diving into a lot of writing challenges and social media contests just for fun, It helps get your gears turning, those writing prompt challenges and those 30, 60-day ones. And it's okay if you miss a day or two, but you should try to complete most of the challenge, or do your best. And so I tried also writing poems in Norwegian, other languages, I'm not fluent in. I did take like a Mandarin Chinese class in high school and stuff, but I'm rusty and stuff, obviously. And I never really picked up any other language besides English. And my dad, he never spoke, any other languages in the house, like I'm not fluent in Punjabi or, Hindi or anything like that, or any of those languages. But, sometimes, of course, we pick up a word or two here, a couple words, but, I'm not fluent in anything besides English anymore. So, so I would say it's cool, maybe try, picking up a language. We've all tried like Duolingo, I'm sure, or something similar to it. But challenge yourself. Maybe try learning, again, a new word in French, or, I've done some micro French poems too and things like that. Try to challenge yourself. If you have a friend who's fluent in a language, have them review it and look at it, because translators aren't, 100% accurate either. And earlier in this podcast, I also touched base on something that helped me as a writer, something I did a lot in middle school, high school, and other times. I tried to learn new words all the time. I really enjoyed doing that. And a thesaurus, there are plenty of thesaurus sites. Try to look up, alternate words, and again, just because you're using a different word for something that means the same thing, synonyms, or a word that means the opposite, antonyms and stuff. Just because you use one, a different word, doesn't mean it's automatically become a stronger poem or short story. It really depends on, again, the originality of the lines you have, and everything, and the creativity of it, from scratch. You want to make sure. So, it is good to, though, learn new words and not use generic common words and stuff, because, I see that often in submissions, again, that we get at Dippity Lit Mag. Sometimes poets have very, very common, lines we've seen before, right? And that's going to affect your originality score and level of creativity. So, try to expand your vocabulary, learn new words, and there's some fun, like social media accounts that do nothing but teach others like a word of a day, a new word, and a definition. Like I used to follow a lot of those accounts, and some other poets in the community would do poems inspired by that new word that they learned, and that's cool. And lastly, I'd like to also add, I wouldn't recommend using, don't use, like, there are like, writing enhancement tools or writing aid tools. I would say don't use AI, okay? When you're writing, as a human being, I think it just feels really messed up. And a lot of lit magazine journals do not accept AI work and stuff. And there are AI checkers, scanners, things to help identify, others who try to do that. But don't use AI, I think it really is, yeah, it's just not, I don't like it. Oh, yeah. I know others, say that they may like AI, and I'm not saying, again, AI, I mentioned this on a podcast earlier, I'm reiterating this. Again, AI, I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world, but I'm saying in the writing community as artists, I think it's so important to create something that you made yourself from scratch and stuff. Think about it this way. What if a machine was making, your a recipe your grandma made or something, like a robot, and then, like, wouldn't it feel weird? It wouldn't have that same feeling if it came directly from, like, a loved one or your grandma, herself, right? It would just feel weird. Same thing could be applied to, like, a poem, right? It feels really messed up when, like, a machine spits something out, and it's not like a handmade or by a human, from start to finish. And it came from their mind, their heart, and everything. I think, yeah. Anyways, so I recommend, don't rely on those tools out there and stuff like that. And, don't use AI, and all that stuff. Really, if you're serious about writing, just start, from, you can build off of your own personal experiences, or write about things you've witnessed or gone through. Start from there, or use writing prompts, if you're having trouble on topics and focuses. And again, I'll put links in the description of some examples, maybe, of some of the things I discussed. And yeah, some of the workshops and event sites, again, so you can check those out. Plenty of other ones out there. I just, gave some examples. And you might come across some poets on social media that have some workshop events and stuff. I've seen some as low as, up to $25 or less than that. Again, there's some single session events that are just a couple of bucks. So it's not like you'll, be, out of pocket of a bunch of money. But if you want to do more intensive courses and stuff, again, yeah, then it'll probably be higher. The longer the course, typically the higher the price, right? That's what I've seen. Yeah, but again, try to get, fees waived, or, there's some, free fee waiver stuff. And, I'm sure, if you reach out to the organizer of the workshop or event, you might be able to get, a fee waived or reduced, because others are totally understandable about that, and things like that. So, yeah, so that's all I wanted to add, and take care. I hope this episode helped you. There are a lot of other ways out there, you can try to strengthen your writing. And I just want to also mention, it's okay to, like, use a grammar checker tool, or, things like that, to try. But just know those aren't 100% accurate. They're not always going to be right. And so you want to really take the time to learn, the foundations and things like that, in terms of, they're different, through school and stuff, we learn different guide styles and stuff like that. So, you shouldn't rely, again, heavily on the tools out there that exist in the world. They can be beneficial, and sometimes, there was this job I had once that, the writers team, everyone used the little Grammarly plugin at the time, and to help catch things they might have missed, sometimes, because no one's accurate 1,000% of the time, every single time. We all make mistakes. We all have typos and hiccups. And sometimes especially when we're doing a very long piece or work, so it's bound to happen. And yeah, it can help to, again, have another set of eyes on things, and proofreading, maybe have a friend, a close trusted loved one, or your best friend, maybe, read over your work and give some helpful suggestions, in terms of, like, sentences that sound off or weird, but to look at it and get feedback from them, or go to one of these workshop ironing out events. And I think it's cool. Some of these events, they dissect poems, dissect short stories, really get in depth into it, and totally. So, again, I hope this helps. And now, bye. And my voice came back a little bit. So, we'll see. But probably will break a little bit. Some events for Dipty Lit Mag are going to be coming up here, and sometime soon. We're almost there. Hopefully this summer. So yeah, I'll do these when I can. Bye, yeah.